Donald's concert. Donald Williams had always been the quiet one in his group of friends. While his friends, like Ethan and Luke, were busy with sports or video games, Donald found his escape in music. He didn't play any instruments, yet, but he always felt a connection to the sounds of the guitar. Something about the way the strings came together, the way the chords seemed to tell a story, always captivated him. For months, he'd been saving up for a guitar, working extra shifts at the family-owned convenience store, mowing lawns, and even tutoring younger kids at school, all to earn the money for his dream. Finally, after weeks of hard work, he had enough. He bought his first guitar, a classic acoustic that wasn't much, but it was enough for him to start. The problem, however, was that Donald's friends didn't understand his passion. Every time he mentioned it, they teased him. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Donald's mother had brought the guitar home. He was beyond excited. His fingers trembled with anticipation as he unboxed it, marveling at the smooth wood and shiny strings. "Mom, I'm going to learn to play guitar," he declared. His mom smiled, ruffling his hair. "That's awesome, honey. Just remember, it takes time and patience." He nodded enthusiastically. Donald wasn't a quitter, and this time, he was determined to prove to himself and everyone else that he could learn. But his friends weren't as supportive. "Dude, what's that?" Ethan asked one afternoon, eyeing the guitar Donald had brought to school. Donald had been carrying it everywhere lately, trying to practice whenever he could. Donald smiled awkwardly. "It's my guitar. I'm learning to play." Luke, who had always been quick to mock anything that wasn't sports-related, snorted. "Oh, really? I didn't know they gave out guitar player certificates for showing up to class." Ethan laughed, joining in. "Yeah, man. You can't even get a single chord right. What makes you think you're going to learn how to play real music?" Donald felt the sting of their words. He wanted to snap back, to tell them that they didn't understand, but instead, he just shrugged it off. "I'm still learning. It'll take time." But the teasing didn't stop. At lunch, every time Donald pulled his guitar out to practice, he could feel their eyes on him. They'd laugh, roll their eyes, and mutter sarcastic comments. Donald's stomach twisted each time, but he didn't let it stop him. He'd go home, sit in his room, and practice, even when the strings didn't sound quite right. He wasn't going to give up. He couldn't. The teasing got worse when he started practicing a little more at school. He was trying to learn the basic chords, strumming through Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star, and a few simple nursery rhymes just to get his fingers used to the strings. But to Ethan and Luke, it was all fodder for more jokes. "Hey, Donald," Ethan said one afternoon after school as Donald was trying to practice outside, "maybe you should quit while you're ahead. You're killing that guitar. It might need a new life after you're done with it." Luke smirked. "Yeah, man, I think the guitar's in more danger than you are. Stick to something you're good at, like playing video games." Donald clenched his fists, but he didn't respond. He had heard the same things over and over, and it wasn't going to stop him. Still, the sting of their words lingered in his chest. Why couldn't they understand? Days turned into weeks, and Donald's determination didn't waver. He spent every free moment trying to get better. He learned basic chords, C, D, G, and A, and soon he was able to play simple melodies. But it wasn't easy. Every time he struggled, he remembered the teasing, the doubts his friends had planted in his mind. Sometimes, he almost felt like giving up. But his love for music, for the guitar, was stronger than any of the words his friends could say. Then, one day, his school announced the annual talent show. It was a huge event where students could showcase their talents, whether it was singing, dancing, acting, or playing an instrument. The sign-up sheet had been posted on the bulletin board, and everyone had been talking about it for weeks. Ethan had already signed up to do his magic tricks. Luke was planning a stand-up comedy routine. Donald had always thought about performing in the talent show, but he wasn't sure he was ready. Still, something inside him pushed him to do it. The teasing had only made him stronger. He could do this. The day Donald signed up for the talent show, he didn't tell anyone. He didn't want to hear the usual mockery. But once he'd written his name down on the sheet, a sense of relief washed over him. He was going to prove to everyone that he was more than just the quiet kid in the corner. The following weeks were a blur of practice. Donald was determined to play a song that would show everyone he wasn't just fooling around with the guitar. He picked a classic, Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. It wasn't an easy song, but it meant something to him. It was about longing, about feeling like an outsider, and Donald could relate to that. He practiced every day after school, sitting in his room, playing the song over and over. His fingers were sore, but he didn't mind. He wanted to be good, and he was willing to put in the work. Finally, the night of the talent show arrived. The school gym was packed with students, teachers, and parents. There was an electric buzz in the air, everyone talking and waiting for the performances to begin. Donald stood backstage, clutching his guitar, heart pounding in his chest. His friends were sitting somewhere in the audience, and he could feel their eyes on him. Next up, Donald Williams. The announcer's voice boomed over the microphone. Donald's stomach twisted as he walked onto the stage, the spotlight blinding him for a moment. He could hear murmurs from the audience, and when he looked out, he saw Ethan and Luke smirking in the front row. He felt his nerves threaten to take over, but then he remembered why he was doing this. It wasn't for them. It was for him. He took a deep breath, sat on the stool, and adjusted the microphone. He could feel the weight of the guitar in his hands, but it felt right. "Hi," Donald said, his voice barely audible at first. "I'm Donald, and I'm going to play Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd." The crowd grew quiet. Donald's fingers found the strings, and he strummed the first chord. At first, the sound was shaky. His fingers were stiff, and he stumbled on a chord, but he didn't stop. He kept going, steadying himself. The notes came together, slowly at first, but then with more confidence. His voice, which had started out soft, grew stronger as he sang the opening lines. "Wish you were here." The audience fell silent, listening intently. Donald wasn't thinking about the teasing anymore. He wasn't thinking about the snickers in the front row. All that mattered was the music, and for the first time in weeks, the music felt like home. As he played, he felt something shift within himself. He wasn't the kid who couldn't play guitar. He was the kid who was determined to learn, to grow, and to chase his dream. With every chord, with every note, he could feel the crowd responding. They were quiet, yes, but it wasn't because they were mocking him. It was because they were listening. By the time he finished the song, the room was still. Then, all at once, the applause erupted. Donald's heart raced as the sound of clapping and cheering filled the gym. He stood up, a bit dazed, and took a bow. When he looked out into the crowd, he saw Ethan and Luke staring at him. Their jaws dropped. They were clapping too, though they didn't say anything. Donald smiled to himself. It didn't matter. He had done it. The next day at school, things were different. The teasing had stopped. Instead, people came up to Donald, complimenting him on his performance. "Man, that was amazing," Ethan said, clapping him on the back. "I didn't know you could play like that." Luke gave him a nod of respect. "You totally killed it." "I was wrong about you, dude." Donald smiled, a little embarrassed but also proud. He didn't need their approval, but it felt good to have it. He had learned the guitar for himself, not to impress anyone, but to express who he was. And as he walked through the halls, his guitar slung over his shoulder, he knew this was only the beginning.